In a crowded courtroom in the small town
All the
of
remaining
Maplewood,
counts life
14-year-old
imprisonment.
Jason Miller sat slouched in his chair, a yawn escaping his lips as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The rows of seats were filled with somber faces, many of them belonging to Sarah Bennett's grieving family and friends. The judge's gavel struck the bench sharply, commanding silence, but Jason's casual indifference seemed to mock the solemnity of the moment. His eyes, half-lidded and unfocused, scanned the courtroom with a detached air, as if the gravity of the proceedings failed to penetrate his youthful apathy. Before we dive into this gripping story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you tuning in from? Your support is crucial in helping us bring you these powerful narratives that shed light on the complexities of human behavior and the justice system. The trial had been a whirlwind of emotion and evidence, but Jason's demeanor throughout had been disturbingly aloof. Witnesses recounted chilling details of the crime. The community's heartbreak was laid bare in victim impact statements, and yet Jason remained unmoved, his posture betraying a profound lack of remorse. Even the prosecuting attorney, Amanda Lee, who had worked tirelessly to piece together the case against him, found it difficult to reconcile the boy's cold detachment with the brutal reality of his actions. As the judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, pronouncing a life sentence without parole, an unexpected sound shattered the heavy silence. A piercing scream erupted from Jason's lips, raw and anguished. The sudden outburst startled everyone present, a stark contrast to the boy's earlier nonchalance. It was a scream not of remorse, but of sheer disbelief, a primal reaction to the finality of his fate. The courtroom fell into stunned silence once more, all eyes turning toward the source of the shock. Jason's scream echoed off the wood-paneled walls, a haunting reminder of the dark journey that had brought this day to pass. The judge's gavel pounded again, attempting to restore order, but Jason's cries continued, growing louder, more desperate. Court officers moved swiftly to restrain him, their hands firm yet cautious as they guided the boy from the courtroom. His screams faded into the background, replaced by whispered conversations and the quiet sobbing of those who had lost so much. The scene was a chilling tableau of a community grappling with the incomprehensible. Here was a boy, barely entering his teenage years, facing the harshest judgment society could impose. His initial indifference had given way to an outpouring of raw emotion, but it came too late to alter the course of justice. The courtroom, once filled with a tense formality, now felt heavy with a sense of finality and loss. Jason Miller's case had captivated Maplewood from the moment the crime was discovered. His youth, combined with the brutal nature of the offense, had sparked fierce debate among residents. Many struggled to understand how someone so young could commit such a heinous act, while others feared the implications for the town's sense of safety and innocence. The trial had laid bare uncomfortable truths about the fragility of community and the unpredictable darkness that can lurk beneath a familiar surface. Throughout the proceedings, Jason's behavior remained a focal point. His yawns, whispered comments, and occasional smirks during testimony drew gasps and glares. Observers noted that his apparent disrespect for the court and the victim's family deepened the wounds already inflicted by the crime itself. This detachment was unsettling, a barrier that seemed to shield him from the consequences of his actions and the pain he had caused. Yet, beneath the indifferent mask, the scream revealed a crack in Jason's facade, a moment of vulnerability that hinted at the torment simmering beneath. It was a raw and unfiltered expression of the shock of losing his freedom and confronting the reality of a life irrevocably altered. For those who witnessed it, the scream was both a terrifying and tragic sound, echoing the complicated emotions surrounding this young life caught in the grip of a devastating crime. The courtroom remained silent in the aftermath, the weight of the moment settling over everyone. Sarah Bennett's family, seated in the front row, held hands tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They had waited months for this day, a day that could never truly heal the wounds, but offered some measure of justice. Their grief was palpable, mingling with the collective sorrow of a town that had lost not just a vibrant teenager, but a piece of its own innocence. Outside the courthouse, reporters scrambled to capture the unfolding drama. The image of Jason Miller, once so seemingly detached and aloof, screaming in anguish after the sentence was handed down, became the defining image of the case. It was a stark reminder of the complexity of youth, crime, and punishment, a moment frozen in time that would be dissected by psychologists, legal experts, and the community for years to come. For the legal teams involved, the day marked the end of a grueling battle. Amanda Lee, the assistant district attorney, had built a case founded on meticulous evidence and the testimonies of those closest to the tragedy. Her closing arguments had been impassioned, calling on the jury to see beyond Jason's age and recognize the severity of his actions. The defense, led by Mark Simmons, had struggled to humanize a client who seemed unwilling or unable to engage with the process, relying heavily on arguments about immaturity and psychological challenges. As Jason was escorted from the courtroom, his screams fading into muffled echoes, a profound silence took hold. The community of Maplewood was left to reckon with the aftermath. A young boy condemned to a lifetime behind bars, a family shattered beyond repair, and a town forever changed. The trial had revealed much, but answered few questions about the darkness that had consumed a seemingly ordinary teenager. In the weeks that followed, the image of Jason's scream after the sentencing would haunt conversations and headlines. It was a moment that encapsulated the tragedy of wasted potential, the clash of innocence and violence, and the harsh realities of justice. For those who had witnessed it, the memory lingered, a chilling reminder of how swiftly life can unravel and how the consequences of one fateful act ripple outward, touching countless lives. Inside the courtroom that day, the stark contrast between Jason's initial indifference and his final outburst painted a disturbing portrait of a young killer caught between defiance and despair. It was a moment that captured the complexity of a case that defied easy answers, a case that would continue to resonate in Maplewood's collective consciousness for years to come. Maplewood had long been celebrated as a haven of tranquility, a town where neighbors knew each other by name, children played freely in sun-dappled streets, and the rhythms of daily life unfolded with comforting predictability. Nestled among rolling hills and lined with tree-shaded sidewalks, the community prided itself on its close-knit spirit and the unspoken promise of safety that enveloped its residents. Yet beneath the idyllic surface, an unimaginable rupture was about to shatter that sense of security forever. Sarah Bennett was the kind of teenager who seemed to embody the very heart of Maplewood's promise. At just 16 years old, she was well known and deeply liked by her peers and teachers alike. A junior at Maplewood High School, Sarah's days were filled with the buzz of extracurricular activities. She was a dedicated member of the debate team, a passionate volunteer at the local animal shelter, and an active participant in the school's environmental club. Her laughter was infectious, her kindness genuine, and her future bright with promise. To her classmates, Sarah was more than just a familiar face. She was a beacon of warmth and positivity. Her teachers often praised her for her diligence and empathy, describing her as a young woman poised for greatness. Friends recalled her infectious enthusiasm for life, the way she lit up a room simply by walking into it. She had dreams of attending college to study environmental science, fueled by a fierce desire to make the world a better place. The news of Sarah's murder sent shock waves through Maplewood, ripping through the fabric of a community that had always believed itself immune to such darkness. Parents held their children a little tighter, schools increased security measures, and the once carefree streets took on a shadow of unease. The town's collective heart seemed to stop as neighbors grappled with the reality that one of their own had been violently taken from them. For the Bennett family, the loss was an unfathomable tragedy. Emily and Robert Bennett, Sarah's parents, were pillars of the community, known for their warmth and generosity. They had raised their daughter with love and care, instilling in her the values that had made her a cherished friend and student. The news of her death shattered their world, leaving a void that nothing could fill. Their grief was raw and unrelenting, a constant ache that permeated every corner of their lives. Sarah's younger brother, Michael, struggled to comprehend the sudden absence of his sister. At 12 years old, he was too young to fully grasp the cruelty of the crime, but old enough to feel the sting of loss. Family members and friends rallied around the Bennetts, offering support and comfort. Yet the pain remained palpable, a wound that refused to heal. Maplewood High School, where Sarah had spent so many formative years, became a focal point of collective mourning. Teachers held memorial assemblies, students organized candlelight vigils, and a mural was painted in Sarah's honor in the school courtyard. The loss was felt deeply within these halls, a stark reminder that even the safest places could be touched by tragedy. The sudden violence of the crime was all the more shocking because it appeared so unprovoked. Sarah's life had been taken in a moment of senseless brutality, with no apparent motive, no warning signs. The community was left desperate for answers, struggling to understand how such an act could have occurred in their peaceful town. Parents voiced their fears at school board meetings, demanding increased supervision and security. Local law enforcement reassured the public that every resource was being deployed to find the perpetrator and restore safety. Yet beneath these efforts lingered a pervasive sense of vulnerability, a collective realization that the innocence of Maplewood had been irrevocably compromised. Neighbors who had once exchanged friendly waves now eyed strangers with suspicion. Evening walks were curtailed. Playgrounds became places of caution rather than carefree play. The fabric of trust that had bound the community frayed under the weight of fear and grief. Sarah's friends, many of them still in shock, spoke in hushed tones about the girl they had lost. The confidant, the laughter, the dreams, abruptly silenced. Their youthful innocence was shattered alongside Sarah's life, replaced by a painful awareness of the fragility of existence. Teachers recounted memories of Sarah's eager participation in class, her thoughtful questions, and her unwavering kindness. The school counselor described her as a bright light who had inspired others, a student with a rare combination of intellect and heart. Now, those memories became both a source of comfort and a haunting reminder of what had been stolen. The town's response was not limited to sorrow. It sparked a movement toward healing and prevention. Community leaders organized forums on youth violence, mental health resources were expanded in schools, and neighborhood watch programs gained renewed vigor. Yet, even as efforts to rebuild were set in motion, the shadow of Sarah's death loomed large. In the midst of this upheaval, the police investigation moved forward with urgency. Officers combed through evidence, interviewed witnesses, and sought any clue that might lead them to the person responsible. The community watched closely, desperate for justice, yet wary of the pain that each new revelation might bring. Sarah's story became a symbol of lost innocence and the urgent need for vigilance. Her life, though tragically cut short, inspired a determination among Maplewood's residents to protect their community and honor her memory. In classrooms, homes, and public spaces, her name was spoken with reverence, a reminder of the fragile beauty of youth and the devastating impact of violence. As the days turned into weeks, the collective grief of Maplewood settled into a quiet resolve. The town mourned the loss of a beloved daughter, a shining star extinguished too soon. And beneath the sorrow, a steadfast hope took root, that through remembrance and action, Sarah Bennett's legacy would endure, guiding the community toward a safer, more compassionate future. On the afternoon of September 14th, the tranquility of Maplewood Park, a favorite spot for students and families alike, was forever shattered. It was here, among the familiar benches and winding gravel paths, shaded by towering oaks, that Sarah Bennett's lifeless body was discovered, igniting a chain of events that would grip the entire community in horror. The discovery was made by a jogger, Thomas Reynolds, who had set out on his usual route just after school hours. As he rounded a bend near the old playground, an unsettling stillness caught his attention. Approaching cautiously, he spotted Sarah lying motionless beneath a cluster of trees, her school backpack splayed open beside her. The sight was so incongruous with the park's usual serenity that it stopped Reynolds cold. He immediately dialed 911, his voice trembling as he reported the scene. Within minutes, police officers and emergency responders arrived, their presence transforming the peaceful park into a flurry of activity. Crime scene tape was quickly erected, cordoning off the area as forensic teams began their meticulous work. The gravity of the situation was evident to all who witnessed the somber procession. The scene was grim and haunting. Sarah's body bore signs of a brutal attack, her clothing torn, wounds visible, and her expression frozen in a final moment of terror. There were no signs of a struggle nearby, no indication of a robbery or theft. It was as if the violence had come swiftly and without warning, leaving behind a chilling silence that hung heavy in the air. Detective Laura Martinez, who led the investigation, arrived on the scene with a practiced calm. Though the weight of the case was unmistakable, she oversaw the collection of evidence with precision, instructing her team to document every detail. Photographs captured the positioning of Sarah's body and the surrounding area, while officers canvassed the park for potential witnesses or overlooked clues. Forensic specialists scoured the area, their gloved hands delicately gathering fibers, footprints, and any trace materials that might unlock the mystery. The absence of a clear motive or weapon at the scene complicated their task, deepening the enigma of the crime. Yet the brutality was undeniable, a savage act that had extinguished a young life in the heart of a town that prized its safety. As news of the discovery spread, Maplewood's residents were gripped by disbelief and sorrow. The park, once a haven of laughter and play, now felt tainted by the shadow of violence. Parents rushed to retrieve their children from after-school activities, and schools issued alerts urging vigilance. The community's sense of security was shattered, replaced by an undercurrent of fear. Sarah's friends gathered at the school, their faces pale and eyes wide with shock. They clung to one another, struggling to process the horrific reality that had invaded their lives. The loss was more than just the death of a peer. It was a rupture of innocence, a reminder that tragedy could strike even in the safest places. Detective Martinez held a press conference that evening, addressing the mounting concerns of a community desperate for answers. She confirmed that Sarah's death was the result of a violent assault and assured the public that the investigation was underway with all available resources. Her words were measured but resolute, conveying both the seriousness of the crime and the commitment to justice. Behind the scenes, the police worked tirelessly to piece together the timeline leading up to the attack. Interviews with Sarah's classmates, teachers, and neighbors painted a picture of a typical day with no apparent threats or conflicts. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses was requested, and patrols increased throughout the town. The investigation soon uncovered that Sarah had been at the park briefly after school, a stop on her way home. The exact timing and circumstances remained unclear, but the proximity to the school and the familiarity of the location suggested she had felt safe there, an assumption now tragically proven false. Forensic analysis began to reveal crucial evidence. Trace DNA found beneath Sarah's fingernails hinted at a struggle, while footprints near the scene suggested the presence of another individual. Still, without a clear suspect or motive, the case remained a puzzle demanding answers. Community members organized vigils in the days that followed, lighting candles and leaving flowers at the park entrance. The murals and memorials blossomed, symbols of collective grief and solidarity. Yet, beneath the camaraderie lay a pervasive unease, an acknowledgment that the town's sense of normalcy had been forever altered. The police's methodical approach was coupled with growing public pressure. Detectives faced the daunting challenge of balancing the need for thorough investigation with the community's urgent desire for resolution. Every lead was pursued, every tip scrutinized as the search for justice intensified. In the midst of the investigation, the Bennett family grappled with the unbearable reality of their loss. Sarah's mother, Emily Bennett, spoke publicly, her voice steady yet laced with heartbreak. She appealed for the community's support and urged anyone with information to come forward. Her plea resonated deeply, touching a nerve in a town desperate for closure. As the days stretched on, the chilling nature of the crime became a focal point of discussions. Experts weighed in on the brutality, the randomness, and the profound impact such violence could have on a community. Psychologists and law enforcement officials alike emphasized the need for vigilance and compassion, recognizing the delicate balance between fear and hope. Throughout the investigation, Maplewood's police department remained vigilant, determined to unravel the mystery behind the attack. The collection of forensic evidence was painstaking, the review of witness statements exhaustive. Yet every step forward seemed to raise new questions, underscoring the complexity of a case that defied easy answers. Sarah Bennett's murder was more than a criminal act. It was a rupture in the fabric of a town that had cherished safety and innocence. The crime scene, once a place of youthful joy, had become a stark reminder of vulnerability and loss. The investigation's early days set the tone for a community united in grief, yet resolute in its pursuit of justice. As the forensic teams packed up their equipment and the police continued their canvassing, the weight of the tragedy lingered in the air. The quiet park, now a crime scene, stood as a somber testament to a life stolen and the profound ripple effects of violence. For Maplewood, the path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by sorrow, but illuminated by collective determination to find the truth. In the days that followed the grim discovery in Maplewood Park, the town's collective anguish transformed into a determined response. Vigils were held under the glow of flickering candles, with mourners gathering to remember Sarah Bennett and to voice their shared grief. The school gymnasium, usually alive with the hum of student activity, became a sanctuary of sorrow and solidarity. Parents, teachers, and students sat side by side, their faces etched with pain and disbelief, united by the loss of a bright young life. Local authorities moved swiftly to reassure a shaken community. Patrols increased around schools and parks, while town officials convened emergency meetings to discuss enhanced safety protocols. The Maplewood School Board implemented new measures, including the installation of additional security cameras and the hiring of extra campus monitors. Parents, once confident in their neighborhood safety, voiced their fears and demanded action, their voices filled with both anger and desperation. Amid this heightened alert, the emotional toll on Sarah's family and friends deepened. At the heart of it all was the Bennett household, where grief was an ever-present shadow. Emily and Robert Bennett were overwhelmed by an unending wave of sorrow, their days consumed by the unbearable reality of their daughter's absence. Friends and neighbors rallied around them, offering support and comfort, but the void left by Sarah's death was vast and unyielding. Sarah's closest friends struggled to navigate their pain, grappling with the sudden void in their daily lives. They clung to memories and photographs, seeking solace in the moments they had shared. Their conversations, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, now revolved around the haunting question of why. School counselors worked tirelessly to provide support, but the wounds ran deep and wide throughout the student body. Amidst this atmosphere of mourning and vigilance, a crucial breakthrough emerged. Security footage from a convenience store near Maplewood Park captured a figure of interest on the afternoon of September 14th, the very day Sarah was attacked. The grainy video, though indistinct, showed a young male lingering near the park entrance, his presence suspicious given the timing. Detectives pored over the footage, enhancing and analyzing every frame in search of clues. The figure was soon identified as Jason Miller, a 14-year-old resident of Maplewood. Known to some as a quiet, somewhat withdrawn boy, Jason's connection to the crime scene raised immediate questions. His presence near the park at the critical time placed him under intense scrutiny, and law enforcement quickly moved to explore this lead. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, where Jason had been seen as just another local teenager. As investigators dug deeper into Jason's background, they uncovered a troubled history marked by minor run-ins with school authorities and signs of social withdrawal. While nothing in his past suggested violent tendencies, his proximity to the crime scene and the timing of his movements could not be ignored. The community's initial disbelief shifted to a mix of fear and confusion. How could someone so young be implicated in such a violent act? The news of Jason's identification as a person of interest spread rapidly, fueling speculation and unease. Neighbors recounted interactions with him, some describing him as aloof, others as simply quiet. Parents questioned how well they truly knew the children in their midst, while teenagers whispered in hallways grappling with the unsettling reality that one of their own might be responsible. Law enforcement officials maintained a cautious approach, emphasizing the need for a thorough investigation before drawing conclusions. Detective Laura Martinez reiterated the importance of evidence and due process, reminding the public that suspicion was not guilt. Yet, the mounting pressure from a community desperate for answers created a charged atmosphere around the unfolding case. Within the Bennett family, the identification of a suspect brought a complex mix of emotions. Relief that progress was being made was tempered by the stark reality of a young boy potentially responsible for their daughter's death. The family's pain was compounded by the knowledge that the perpetrator was not a stranger but a member of their own community, a fact that deepened the wound. As the investigation progressed, police sought to establish Jason's movements in the hours surrounding the attack. Interviews with acquaintances and school staff painted a picture of a boy who often kept to himself, someone who struggled to connect with peers. Yet, no concrete motive had emerged, leaving investigators to piece together the puzzle from fragments of behavior and circumstantial evidence. Community meetings became forums for candid discussion, where parents voiced concerns about youth mental health and the pressures facing teenagers. Experts were brought in to address the challenges of adolescence, the warning signs of distress, and the importance of early intervention. The tragedy sparked conversations that extended beyond the crime itself, touching on broader issues of support and understanding in a changing world. Meanwhile, the school environment shifted under the weight of suspicion and fear. Jason's classmates found themselves caught between loyalty and disbelief, unsure how to reconcile the boy they thought they knew with the accusations mounting against him. Teachers worked to maintain a sense of normalcy while addressing the emotional needs of their students, a delicate balance in a community on edge. Law enforcement's focus on Jason intensified as forensic evidence continued to be analyzed. Items recovered near the crime scene were cross-referenced with his belongings, and digital footprints were scrutinized for any indication of planning or motive. The web of investigation tightened, each thread bringing the case closer to a pivotal moment. Jason's demeanor during initial questioning was notably detached, a fact that perplexed both investigators and the public. His apparent lack of remorse and the coolness with which he responded to inquiries stood in stark contrast to the profound grief surrounding him. The juxtaposition fueled debates about youth accountability and the psychological factors at play. As the community awaited further developments, the tension remained palpable. Maplewood was a town forever altered, caught between mourning and the pursuit of justice. The identification of Jason Miller as the prime suspect was a turning point, transforming the tragedy from an inexplicable loss into a legal battle that would test the town's resilience and resolve. In the midst of mounting evidence and shifting perceptions, the case took on a new urgency. Investigators prepared to move forward with arrests and charges, aware of the delicate balance between ensuring justice and protecting the rights of a minor. The courtroom loomed on the horizon, promising a reckoning that would expose the complexities of a young life entangled in a devastating crime. Throughout Maplewood, the ripples of this discovery continued to spread. Families reevaluated their own children's relationships and behaviors, schools heightened their vigilance, and the community braced for the legal storm to come. The fragile peace that had once defined the town was replaced by a charged atmosphere of anticipation and anxiety. Sarah Bennett's memory remained at the heart of it all, a symbol of innocence lost and a catalyst for change. Her friends and family held on to her legacy, their grief intertwined with a fierce determination to see justice served. As the investigation advanced, the people of Maplewood faced the difficult task of confronting the truth about one of their own and the consequences that would follow. In the quiet early morning hours, the Maplewood Police Department executed a carefully planned arrest at the Miller family home. Jason Miller, the 14-year-old boy identified as the prime suspect in Sarah Bennett's murder, was taken into custody without resistance. The stark contrast between the gravity of the charges and Jason's eerie calmness was immediately apparent to all involved. His expression remained blank, his movements slow and deliberate, as if detached from the storm about to engulf his life. Officers had arrived with a warrant, the culmination of weeks of painstaking investigation and mounting evidence. Inside Jason's room, a search was conducted with meticulous care. Investigators sifted through personal belongings, digital devices, and clothing, seeking any trace that might link him definitively to the crime. Each item was cataloged and sealed, destined for forensic analysis that would become pivotal in the prosecution's case. Among the discoveries were items that deepened the case against Jason. A pair of sneakers, stained with what forensic experts later confirmed was blood matching Sarah's DNA, and a knife that bore striking resemblance to the weapon used in the attack. These findings, though circumstantial, painted a chilling picture of involvement. Investigators also uncovered messages and notes that hinted at troubling thoughts, though their significance remained subject to interpretation. Throughout the search and arrest, Jason's demeanor was unsettlingly indifferent. He neither protested nor pleaded, offering no explanation or defense. This detachment extended to his interactions with officers, who noted a lack of emotional response that contrasted starkly with the gravity of the situation. The boy who had once blended into the fabric of a peaceful town now stood at the center of a dark and complex case. The community's reaction to the arrest was a mixture of shock and apprehension. Neighbors who had seen Jason as a quiet, unassuming teenager struggled to reconcile the image of the boy they knew with the evidence mounting against him. Parents expressed relief that a suspect was in custody but remained troubled by the implications of such violence stemming from within their own midst. As news of the arrest spread, the local media descended on the Miller residence, capturing images of the somber scene. Reporters sought to unravel the enigma of Jason's life, his background, his family, and the factors that could have led to this tragic moment. Interviews with acquaintances painted a portrait of a boy marked by social isolation and occasional behavioral issues, though nothing that foreshadowed such a violent act. The Miller family, caught in the maelstrom of public scrutiny, maintained a guarded silence. Their home, once a place of normalcy, became the focal point of rumors and speculation. Friends and relatives expressed shock and sorrow, struggling to understand how a child they knew could be accused of such a horrific crime. The weight of the investigation pressed heavily upon them, fracturing the once stable foundation of their lives. Back at the police station, the interrogation process unfolded under intense scrutiny. Detectives approached Jason with a blend of firmness and caution, aware of his youth and the psychological complexities involved. Initial questioning was met with silence and monosyllabic answers, his responses calculated and devoid of emotion. The lack of cooperation frustrated investigators, complicating efforts to piece together a clear narrative. Despite his reticence, subtle shifts in Jason's demeanor emerged during prolonged questioning. At times, fleeting expressions of frustration or confusion surfaced, hinting at an internal struggle beneath the surface. Yet, he offered no admission of guilt, maintaining a stony silence that left much unresolved. Psychological professionals were brought in to assess his mental state, aiming to understand the motivations and mindset of a boy accused of a devastating crime. The defense team was swiftly appointed, led by attorney Mark Simmons, who faced the daunting task of representing a client whose behavior defied easy explanation. Simmons sought to portray Jason as a troubled youth, grappling with immaturity and psychological challenges, emphasizing the need for compassion and rehabilitation rather than harsh punishment. However, Jason's own detachment complicated efforts to build a narrative that might elicit sympathy or understanding. As forensic results began to arrive, the prosecution's case grew stronger. Blood tests confirmed the match between the evidence found in Jason's possession and the victim, while the knife was linked conclusively to the attack. These findings, combined with the security footage placing him near the crime scene, created a formidable body of evidence. Prosecutor Amanda Lee prepared to present a case that would argue for accountability despite Jason's youth. The juxtaposition of Jason's indifferent attitude with the overwhelming evidence against him created a stark and unsettling dynamic. Observers noted the chilling disconnect between the boy's apparent emotional void and the violent nature of the crime. This contradiction became a focal point for both legal teams as they prepared for the inevitable court battle. Community members grappled with the implications of the arrest. Conversations shifted from shock to a deeper examination of the factors that might have contributed to such a tragedy. Mental health advocates called for increased resources and early intervention programs, while others debated the appropriate balance between justice and mercy for juvenile offenders. The case sparked a broader dialogue about youth violence and societal responsibility. Meanwhile, Sarah Bennett's family faced the renewed pain of confronting the accused. Their grief was compounded by the public nature of the proceedings and the unsettling prospect of a trial that would revisit the details of their daughter's final moments. Yet, amid the sorrow, their resolve to seek justice remained unshaken. The legal teams began the intricate process of preparing for trial. Prosecutors focused on the strength of the physical evidence and the need to hold Jason accountable for the magnitude of his actions. The defense, constrained by the boy's own silence and apparent indifference, endeavored to humanize him by exploring his background and psychological state. As the case moved forward, the community watched with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The arrest of Jason Miller marked a turning point, a shift from investigation to adjudication, from questions to answers. Yet, beneath the surface, complexities and uncertainties lingered, casting a shadow over the path to justice. In the midst of this, Jason remained an enigma, a boy caught between the innocence of youth and the stark reality of his alleged crimes. His calm exterior masked a turbulent interior that few could comprehend. The stage was set for a trial that would not only determine his fate, but also challenge the community's understanding of accountability, remorse, and the consequences of violence. The days following the arrest were filled with a flurry of legal motions, media coverage, and community reactions. Maplewood found itself at the center of a story that transcended its borders, drawing attention to the tragic intersection of youthful potential and irreversible actions. For those involved, the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, burdened by the weight of loss and the pursuit of truth. Assistant is working on the response. The day the jury was selected for Jason Miller's trial, the Maplewood courthouse buzzed with a mix of anticipation and unease. The community, still reeling from the brutal loss of Sarah Bennett and shaken by the shocking revelation that the accused was a boy barely into his teens, packed the courtroom and adjacent hallways. The air was thick with tension, every whispered conversation underscored by the weight of the impending trial that promised to expose raw wounds and challenge deeply held beliefs about justice and youth. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was somber yet charged. Prospective jurors were carefully vetted, their backgrounds and biases scrutinized to ensure impartiality in a case fraught with emotion. The process was painstaking, with attorneys from both sides probing for any sign that might sway the delicate balance of fairness. It was clear that the jury would bear a heavy responsibility, not just to the law, but to the community's fragile sense of closure. As the trial commenced, opening arguments set the tone for a courtroom drama that would grip Maplewood. Assistant District Attorney Amanda Lee delivered a firm and unwavering statement, painting a picture of a violent and senseless crime committed by a young boy who must be held accountable. Her words were carefully chosen to emphasize the severity of the offense, the pain inflicted on Sarah's family, and the necessity of justice that transcends age. Opposing her, defense attorney Mark Simmons adopted a different approach, seeking to humanize Jason and frame the case within the complexities of adolescence. He highlighted Jason's psychological struggles and immaturity, urging the jury to consider factors beyond the physical evidence. Simmons's opening remarks were measured, appealing to compassion and understanding, yet tempered by the undeniable gravity of the charges. Throughout the proceedings, Jason's behavior emerged as a focal point. From the outset, he displayed a provocative demeanor that unsettled many in the courtroom. His yawns during witness testimonies, whispered comments to his attorney, and occasional smirks were interpreted as a blatant disregard for the seriousness of the trial. Observers noted how this conduct seemed to undermine his defense, reinforcing the prosecution's portrayal of him as indifferent and callous. Witness after witness took the stand, their testimonies weaving together a narrative both harrowing and meticulous. Forensic experts presented detailed analyses of the physical evidence, the blood-stained sneakers, the matching knife, the footprints near the crime scene. Each piece of evidence was dissected with precision, underscoring the prosecution's case that Jason was undeniably linked to the crime. The victim's family delivered moving impact statements, their voices trembling but resolute. Sarah's mother spoke of a daughter taken too soon, a bright light extinguished by a senseless act. The courtroom was filled with quiet sobs and nods of empathy as the jury absorbed the profound human cost behind the legal arguments. These moments grounded the trial in real-world pain, a stark contrast to the clinical presentation of evidence. Meanwhile, the defense's attempts to mitigate Jason's responsibility faced significant challenges. Psychological experts testified about his mental state, describing him as a troubled youth, grappling with impulsivity and emotional difficulties. However, cross-examinations deftly questioned the reliability of these assessments, highlighting the absence of any prior violent behavior and casting doubt on whether these issues could excuse or explain the alleged crime. A pivotal moment came when a school counselor took the stand, recounting Jason's history of behavioral problems, but denying any indication of violent tendencies. Her testimony served to complicate the defense's narrative, suggesting that while Jason struggled socially and emotionally, he was not a harbinger of violence. This nuanced portrayal deepened the jury's deliberations, adding layers of complexity to their task. Throughout the trial, the courtroom's atmosphere grew increasingly strained. Jason's dismissive behavior sparked frustration among jurors, courtroom staff, and observers alike. Some whispered about his apparent lack of respect for the judicial process, while others speculated about underlying psychological causes for such conduct. The tension was palpable, a silent undercurrent that influenced perceptions and colored the proceedings. Attorneys on both sides navigated this charged environment with care. Amanda Lee capitalized on Jason's demeanor to reinforce her argument that he was a dangerous individual who showed no remorse. Mark Simmons grappled with the challenge of defending a client whose own actions in court seemed to undermine their case, striving to shift focus onto the broader context of youth and mental health. As days turned into weeks, the trial unfolded with relentless intensity. Each witness added a new dimension to the story, and each piece of evidence tightened the noose around Jason's fate. The jury was tasked with sifting through a complex web of facts, emotions, and legal arguments to arrive at a verdict that would reverberate far beyond the courtroom walls. Outside, the community followed the trial closely. Local news outlets provided daily updates, capturing public reactions and expert analyses. The case sparked widespread debate about juvenile justice, the capacity for rehabilitation, and the boundaries of accountability. Maplewood found itself grappling not only with the tragedy of Sarah's death, but also with the profound questions raised by Jason's trial. In the courtroom, moments of quiet reflection occasionally pierced the tension. The judge's firm reminders to maintain decorum, The careful reading of evidence and the solemn delivery of testimonies all underscored the gravity of the process. It was a stark reminder that beneath the legal battles lay real lives irrevocably changed. As the trial progressed, Jason remained an enigma, his behavior a puzzle that both confounded and alarmed. His yawns and smirks challenged the expectations of remorse and respect, leaving jurors and spectators alike to wrestle with the dissonance between a boy's outward indifference and the devastating consequences of his alleged actions. The courtroom drama reached a crescendo as closing arguments approached, with both sides preparing to make their final appeals to the jury's sense of justice, empathy, and reason. The community braced for the verdict that would bring this harrowing chapter one step closer to resolution. In these moments, the trial of Jason Miller became more than a legal proceeding. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities of human behavior, the challenges of youth, and the enduring quest for justice in the face of tragedy. The echoes of the courtroom would resonate long after the gavel fell, shaping the lives of all who bore witness to this profound and painful story. The courtroom fell into a tense hush as Dr. Helen Marks, a renowned child psychologist, took the stand. Clad in a conservative Navy suit, her demeanor exuded both calm authority and the weight of expertise. She was called by the defense to provide insight into Jason Miller's psychological state, a last hope to cast doubt on the prosecution's unyielding narrative. The defense sought to argue that Jason's youth and mental health struggles played a critical role in the tragic events that unfolded. Dr. Marks began by outlining her extensive evaluation of Jason, conducted over several weeks in a clinical setting. She described a boy grappling with impulsivity, mood swings, and emotional detachment, a young adolescent overwhelmed by inner turmoil. According to her assessment, Jason exhibited signs consistent with borderline personality disorder and severe anxiety, conditions that impaired his judgment and heightened his vulnerability to stress. Her testimony painted a picture of a boy not fully in control of his actions, caught in a web of psychological challenges. As she spoke, the courtroom absorbed her words with a mix of empathy and skepticism. The defense attorney, Mark Simmons, seized the moment to emphasize that Jason's behavior was a cry for help, rather than a manifestation of inherent violence. He argued passionately that the boy's immaturity and mental health issues warranted treatment and understanding, not the harshest penalties. Simmons urged the jury to consider the complexity of adolescent development and the potential for rehabilitation, but the prosecution was prepared. Assistant District Attorney Amanda Lee rose for a rigorous cross-examination, her tone sharp and unyielding. She challenged the credibility of Dr. Marks's conclusions, questioning the reliability of psychological diagnoses made in the context of a high-profile criminal case. Lee pointed out the absence of any prior violent behavior in Jason's history, asking how such a drastic act could suddenly emerge from someone with no previous record. Dr. Marks stood her ground, but conceded that psychological evaluations were inherently limited and could not provide absolute certainty. The prosecution pressed further, highlighting inconsistencies in Jason's behavior, his apparent detachment during the crime, and his indifferent demeanor in court, which seemed at odds with the image of a troubled but nonviolent youth. Lee's pointed questions aimed to erode the defense's argument that mental illness excused or explained the crime. The courtroom watched as the battle between medical science and legal accountability unfolded. The defense's attempt to humanize Jason through psychological testimony was met with a firm rebuttal from the prosecution's relentless insistence on responsibility. Jurors were left to navigate a complicated terrain, balancing compassion with justice in a case that defied simple answers. Adding another layer of complexity, the school counselor, Ms. Karen Fields, was called to testify. She spoke candidly about Jason's behavioral issues, frequent absences, difficulty forming friendships, and episodes of defiance, but was unequivocal in denying any indication of violent tendencies. Her testimony underscored the defense's claim that Jason was a troubled child, yet not one predisposed to violence. However, during cross-examination, Amanda Lee deftly highlighted moments when Jason's behavior had raised concern, such as incidents of aggression toward peers and a lack of empathy in social situations. These examples suggested a pattern of escalating problems rather than isolated struggles. Lee argued that these warning signs should have alerted caregivers and authorities to the potential for more serious actions. The defense's efforts to elicit sympathy for Jason were further complicated by the victim's family's presence in the courtroom. Their stoic faces bore witness to the human cost of the crime, a silent but powerful reminder of the life lost. The contrast between the clinical discussions of psychology and the raw grief of the Bennetts added emotional weight that no expert testimony could erase. Throughout the proceedings, Jason himself remained an inscrutable figure. His expression was often blank, his eyes distant, offering little to reveal his inner state. Occasionally, fleeting moments of agitation surfaced, a clenched jaw, a furrowed brow, but he never spoke or engaged directly with the testimony. His silence became a subject of speculation, interpreted variously as defiance, confusion, or an inability to confront the reality before him. Legal analysts later noted that the defense's reliance on psychological testimony was a calculated risk. While it offered a potential avenue for mitigating the severity of charges, it also exposed Jason to scrutiny over his mental fitness and personal history. The prosecution's counter-arguments sought to frame mental illness not as an excuse, but as a factor that demanded careful consideration without absolution. Outside the courtroom, the community grappled with the implications of the testimony. Advocates for mental health services praised the attention brought to adolescent psychological struggles, calling for increased support and early intervention programs. Others expressed frustration, fearing that such arguments might be used to evade justice. The case sparked broader conversations about how society addresses youth behavior, trauma, and accountability. Inside the courthouse, the judge reminded all parties of the need to focus on facts and evidence, cautioning against allowing emotions to cloud judgment. The jury, meanwhile, listened intently, aware that their decision would hinge not only on physical proof, but also on the nuanced interpretations of human behavior presented before them. As the trial advanced, the tension between medical explanation and legal responsibility remained a central theme. The defense's portrayal of Jason as a vulnerable adolescent struggling with mental health challenges clashed with the prosecution's portrayal of a calculated and remorseless perpetrator. This dichotomy underscored the complexities of the case, challenging jurors to weigh competing narratives in their quest for truth. The courtroom drama unfolded like a delicate dance, with each side probing for weaknesses and strengths in the other's arguments. Moments of empathy were interspersed with sharp legal maneuvers, and the human stories beneath the headlines came into sharper focus. Jason Miller's fate now rested on the jury's ability to reconcile these conflicting portrayals and deliver a verdict that balanced justice with understanding. As closing arguments loomed, the emotional and intellectual stakes grew ever higher. The testimonies, expert opinions, and personal stories woven throughout the trial had created a multifaceted mosaic, reflecting the profound challenges inherent in adjudicating crimes involving youth and mental health. The courtroom was poised on the edge of a decision that would reverberate far beyond its walls, shaping not only the life of one boy, but also the conscience of an entire community. The atmosphere in the Maplewood courtroom was electric as the jury filed back in after hours of deliberation. Faces tense and eyes fixed forward, the 12 individuals had wrestled with a complex web of evidence, testimonies, and emotions. The weight of their decision was palpable. A community awaited justice, a family sought closure, and a boy's fate hung precariously in the balance. Judge Reynolds called the court to order, his voice steady but solemn as he invited the foreperson to deliver the verdict. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the soft rustle of papers and the occasional intake of breath. The jurors had been charged with the grave responsibility of determining whether Jason Miller was guilty of first-degree murder in the brutal killing of Sarah Bennett. The foreperson rose, a middle-aged woman whose expression conveyed the gravity of the moment. She began to read the verdict with deliberate clarity. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jason Miller, guilty of first-degree murder. The words hung heavy in the air, met with a mixture of silence, subdued sobs, and stifled gasps. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively, the tension easing, yet replaced with a somber finality. Jason's reaction was immediate and visceral. As the sentence was pronounced, a piercing scream erupted from deep within him, an anguished, guttural sound that shattered the courtroom's stillness. His cry was raw and unfiltered, a sudden eruption of emotion that belied the detached demeanor he had maintained throughout the trial. The outburst stunned everyone present, a haunting echo of the boy's internal turmoil now laid bare. Security personnel swiftly moved to restrain him, their hands firm yet gentle as they guided Jason to his feet and toward the exit. His screams continued, reverberating through the courtroom, a chilling soundtrack to a moment that no one would soon forget. The judge banged his gavel in a futile attempt to restore order, while Sarah Bennett's family sat with tears streaming down their faces, the pain of loss etched in every line. For the Bennett family, the guilty verdict was a bittersweet moment. Relief mingled with sorrow, a recognition that justice had been served even as the void left by Sarah's absence remained unfillable. Emily and Robert Bennett clung to each other, their grief momentarily tempered by a sense of accountability finally achieved. Their voices had been heard, their daughter's life honored through the course of the trial. The community of Maplewood, too, reacted with a mixture of emotions. Many expressed gratitude for the swift and decisive outcome, viewing the verdict as a necessary step toward healing. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet sadness persisted, a recognition that no sentence could truly undo the tragedy or restore the innocence lost. The town's collective heart bore the scars of the ordeal, a somber reminder of the fragility of peace. Legal experts weighed in on the case's implications, noting the rarity and complexity of prosecuting a juvenile as an adult for such a grave offense. The swift jury decision was seen as a reflection of the overwhelming evidence and the emotional power of the victim's family's testimony. Discussions about juvenile justice, rehabilitation, and the boundaries of accountability intensified in public forums and media coverage. Inside the courthouse, the mood was somber as Jason was formally sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Judge Reynolds delivered a stern admonition, emphasizing the severity of the crime and the necessity of the sentence. His words resonated with the weight of the law, underscoring the consequences of Jason's actions and the protection of society. As the judge pronounced the sentence, Jason's facade crumbled. The boy, who had appeared indifferent throughout the trial, now broke down in uncontrollable sobs. His cries echoed through the courtroom, not for the victim, but for himself, a raw and desperate expression of fear, regret, and loss. It was a moment that revealed the profound complexity of a young life irrevocably changed by violence and consequence. The courtroom staff moved quickly to escort Jason from the room, his screams fading into muffled echoes as security personnel guided him away. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken reflections on the tragedy and its aftermath. For those who had witnessed the trial, the image of Jason's anguished cries would linger, a haunting reminder of the human cost behind the legal proceedings. Sarah Bennett's friends and classmates grappled with the verdict and its emotional aftermath. School counselors provided support as the community sought to process the intertwined feelings of justice served and innocence lost. Memorials continued to honor Sarah's memory, serving as a beacon of resilience amid the sorrow. As the trial concluded, the broader implications for the justice system and juvenile offenders came into sharper focus. The case highlighted the challenges of addressing serious crimes committed by minors, balancing the need for accountability with considerations of youth and potential rehabilitation. Debates sparked by the trial's outcome rippled beyond Maplewood, engaging legal scholars, policymakers, and advocacy groups. For the Bennett family, the verdict marked a step toward closure, though the journey of healing remained long and arduous. Their public statements reflected a desire for compassion and justice, emphasizing the importance of community support in the face of tragedy. Their courage in confronting the legal process offered a poignant testament to the enduring strength of love and loss. In the weeks following the trial, Maplewood began the slow process of rebuilding. Community initiatives focused on healing and prevention took root, aiming to address the underlying issues that had culminated in the tragedy. Schools implemented programs to foster awareness and support mental health, while local leaders worked to restore a sense of safety and unity. The trial of Jason Miller became a defining chapter in Maplewood's history, a story marked by sorrow, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The verdict closed one painful door while opening difficult conversations about youth, violence, and accountability. As the community moved forward, the echoes of the courtroom would serve as a reminder of the profound complexities inherent in human nature and the enduring quest for healing in the aftermath of loss. As security officers escorted Jason Miller from the courtroom, his anguished screams echoed down the polished hallways of the Maplewood Justice Center. His cries, a raw, guttural outburst, resounded with a desperation that seemed to claw at the very walls. His small frame trembled under the weight of the life sentence just pronounced, the reality of confinement settling into a terrifying finality. The boy who had once met the proceedings with chilling indifference was now a vivid portrait of panic and despair. The courtroom emptied slowly, the somber silence filled only by the soft sobs of Sarah Bennett's family and the quiet murmurs of the spectators. Emily and Robert Bennett sat clasping hands, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and profound sorrow. Justice had been served, yet no sentence could restore the daughter they lost or erase the indelible scars left upon their hearts. The community, too, was left grappling with a complex mix of emotions, grief, anger, and a cautious hope for healing. Outside, reporters and onlookers gathered beneath the courthouse steps, voices hushed as they recounted the harrowing scenes within. The image of Jason's scream lingered in the collective consciousness, a haunting symbol of the collision between youthful innocence and irrevocable consequence. For many, it was a chilling reminder of how swiftly the course of a life could be altered, and how deeply one violent act could ripple through a community. In the days following the sentencing, Maplewood found itself enveloped in reflection and dialogue. Town meetings convened to address the lingering wounds and to explore ways to prevent future tragedies. Mental health professionals, educators, and law enforcement officials joined forces, advocating for increased resources to support at-risk youth and to foster safer environments. The community's resolve was palpable, driven by a shared determination to transform grief into action. Within the Bennett household, the family's grief remained an ever-present companion. Yet, amidst the sorrow, they found solace in the outpouring of support from friends, neighbors, and even strangers moved by their story. Their public statements emphasized forgiveness and the importance of healing, urging the town to come together rather than fracture under the weight of pain. Their courage became a beacon, guiding Maplewood through its darkest hours. Meanwhile, Jason's screams in the courtroom became a focal point of psychological inquiry and public debate. Experts pondered the significance of his delayed emotional breakdown, a stark contrast to his earlier detachment. Some interpreted it as the sudden confrontation with irreversible consequences. Others saw it as a manifestation of deep-seated trauma and fear. The outburst underscored the complex interplay of youth, accountability, and the human capacity for both suffering and denial. In the months that followed, Jason was transferred to a juvenile detention facility, where he would begin serving his life sentence. Reports described him as withdrawn and haunted, a boy grappling with the enormity of his actions and the harsh reality of his confinement. Rehabilitation programs were initiated, though the prospects of redemption seemed overshadowed by the severity of his crime and the community's demand for justice. The trial and its aftermath left an indelible mark on Maplewood, a community forever altered by violence, yet strengthened by resilience. Schools introduced new curricula focused on conflict resolution, mental health awareness, and community engagement. Neighborhood watch groups expanded, and local leaders championed initiatives aimed at fostering connection and understanding among youth. The tragedy became a catalyst for change, a painful but necessary impetus for growth. For those who had borne witness to the courtroom drama, the memory of Jason's screams remained a haunting echo, a poignant reminder of the cost of violence and the profound consequences of choices made in moments of darkness. It was an image that captured the fragile boundary between childhood and adulthood, innocence and guilt, despair and hope. As Maplewood moved forward, the lessons of the case continued to resonate. Families, educators, and officials confronted the challenges of nurturing young lives in a complex world, striving to identify warning signs and provide support before tragedy could strike again. The community's commitment to vigilance and compassion became a testament to the enduring strength of human spirit in the face of loss. Sarah Bennett's legacy lived on not only in memorials and memories, but also in the renewed dedication to protecting the future of Maplewood's children. Her story served as a solemn call to action, an urging to listen, to intervene, and to care. In honoring her life, the town sought to build a safer, more compassionate community where such darkness might never find a foothold again. The courtroom where justice had been served stood as a silent witness to the profound complexities woven throughout the trial, the interplay of youth and violence, accountability and mercy, grief and healing. The echoes of that day would linger in the hearts of all who had been touched, a stark reminder that behind every verdict lies a tapestry of human stories, fraught with pain, hope, and the enduring quest for redemption.